Brilliant, thanks for that. Right, so moving on to the next one. This is an interesting question. What do you think people are getting? What do you think? Which trends do you think people are kind of making a lot of noise about at the moment, which are either being handled badly or are just a completely bad idea in the first place? Any input on that, Nick?
I think there's lots of talk about AI and machine learning and chatbots, and you can stretch them out and say, well, AI is in the deep future, machine learning is the medium range, and then we've got chatbots. The thing about chatbots is it's like happened, to make an analogy back to the old days of spreadsheets, where people embedded a lot of logic in things, and then it all got spread around an organization, it all diverged. So the usefulness of having a honed customer experience that you can have in one central place or cloud-based and be available for people is useful. But then the personalization, to merge it with personalization. So.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's so much. I think there's a lot of hype gets generated around these things whenever they come out, like Google Glass and everything else.
Yeah.
It's about, I think sometimes, and I think there's a lot of airlines agree with this as well, actually, that there's still a lot of progress to be made, just getting the basics sorted out. If you
it's not progress by technologists. There has to be something in the market, and people go through an experience of learning, because you don't know what the emergent effects of something are. So it's more of a dialogue with your passengers, learn from them, and then pull it back in. So you refine something over time.
Absolutely. Well, Ursula, how are you? What's your opinion as somebody who's probably on the front line of helping airlines adopt these technologies? Or you do a lot of change management and things like that with airlines, don't you?
Yeah, I think on the one hand there are lots of opportunities with it, and if I take the example of chatbots, this year it's like chatbots is the hot topic, and you hear almost every week there's at least one airline having introduced a chatbot. And if you look in some countries, people really even see the human side of the bots, so you could imagine that this can really help to get a better customer service 24 hours, 7 days a week. And even in a human way. And I think there is a similar thing with messaging, where you can really interact, you can get the feedback from customers. But what I see is this will only help if you solve the underlying problems. And there is a big risk if you haven't solved your processes and the underlying problems, then this could actually be even turned into a problem. What do I mean with it? Just to give some examples, if some of the problems which airlines face today is that a customer might contact the call center, but the agent actually can't give a response and has to maybe send the customer to somebody else. Or the customer gets some different information at the airport versus information they already get in the app and information they get from an airline employee. And I think this is one of the underlying problems, that the processes are not harmonized, there's too much complexity, there's no knowledge sharing within the airline, and there are no systems to get even staff feedback about what are some of the biggest pain points coming up. And I think they would almost need to use even the chatbots and even the messaging first to get the staff into this and to get the information around to ensure that they are really aware of where the issues are, what are the most common issues, or even points where they can sell more to use the chatbots for, and then turn this into an advantage. I think there are very good opportunities even for revenue earning apart from the customer service side. If you look at, I like the seat example because it's such a big issue. Airlines manage to make a lot of revenue by selling seats, but then they have aircraft changes last minute. They are not prepared for it. The customer arrives at the airport quite often. The airport staff isn't even prepared for it, so the customer gets a bad surprise, but paid a lot of money for a seat. So if you used a chatbot, if you used your notification to inform the customer beforehand, to offer choices immediately, then actually you can turn this into an advantage. But to do that, you need to get your processes right, and you need to even understand that this is a main pain point, and that you will not manage to keep your ancillary revenues up if you continue having such problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we found with we've been talking to a lot of airlines about chatbots for a lot of the disruption and flight status notifications and that kind of thing that we do at the moment, and we can definitely see some uses for it. But there is an assumption that you are going to just instigate a conversation with someone, or they're going to request it and say, hi Alexa, tell me about how's my flight going, and Alexa's going to tell you your flight's late, and then you'll ask Alexa what time you need to get to the airport then, and that kind of stuff. And to me, that is just speeding up the slow process of them having to phone the airline. It doesn't actually do what you want, which is to give live, relevant information to everyone, and that's passengers and staff members and the call center and everyone all at the same time, to say the plan has changed. This is what's happening now. These are the options, and to push that out in an empathetic way so that people can actually deal with it. Rather than I don't want to ask the airline if my flight's late or any of that stuff. I want them to tell me what
what I want a notification rather than
exactly.
than having to find out the problem yourself.
I might want to interact on choices and that kind of thing, but I shouldn't have to draw the information out. What do you?
Can I just add one point to this? Sorry just one very good example, I think, related to this as well is a live example from a very big airline spending millions, hundreds of millions in technology. With a delay, the customers being on the way to the airport or just about to leave, they get this message: we are very sorry, your flight has been cancelled. We will keep you posted in due course. The customers have had arranged meetings, dinner meetings, whatever, personal issues or business issues, and they get a message and they just get irritated because they don't get a solution. And I think that's part of a problem. And then calling, they get into further trouble because they still don't get a solution. And that's, I think, where it comes in. If you don't get your basics right first, then this will actually cause more problems than it will help.
Totally. Speeding that up through self-service isn't going to help, is it? It's not going to...
And also thinking that the passenger is the focal point, because the passenger might have a PA or a service that arranges their agenda, so it's a cascading notification. How do you...
Yeah, pushing notifications out to travel agents, for instance, who booked it. Yeah. That's we're not getting into that again. Like I said, we always get into this debate. And I'm not doing it.
Ursula brought up a really interesting point. Tucked in one of her comments was about systems working at a different pace, because I've been in an airport and my app's been telling me more about the status of the flight than is on the screen, and there's that starts to also split people apart. It creates a them and us, as opposed to everyone gets the same service. But that doesn't mean you deliver the most mediocre result. You want everyone to have the best real-time information.
It's really interesting you say that, actually. We do live flight updates, and sometimes we've had to slow them down so that they arrive at the same time as the screen in the airport to try and stop causing so much confusion. But I saw a thing recently with I think it's Virgin Trains or something, and they're actually using it to create a them and us situation where they're going, if you want to be in the know, if you want to be the first one stood in front of the train door when it opens, get the app, and that's how we're going to do it.
Well, that'll get the other 85% of people that you mentioned not to use the app.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think, it's not that kind of thing's interesting, but I don't think that type, creating that type of tension is necessarily very helpful. What do you think, Kevin, about this stuff? Have you seen any?
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to the question that's on the screen. Are airlines getting too involved with messaging platforms and chatbots? I mean, the simple answer is no. I mean, they have to try these things. I mean, as I mentioned in my kind of introduction at the beginning, is that I remember 12 years ago when airlines were agonizing over how to do their own websites and how they should do things like that, and it would take them ages to figure it all out. Whereas now there is this, I don't want to make too much of the whole Steve Jobs way of thinking, but at least airlines are now going down that kind of road which suggests strategically we should just try stuff, because it allows us to get an understanding of what our consumers, our passengers are doing and how they communicate, not just with us as an individual airline, but how they communicate with anybody that's important in their life, whether that's friends, family, or other brands. So to be able to just try these kind of things, and if it doesn't work, you dust yourself down and you move on and try something else. So just back to the question, no, they need to be trying lots of other things. Now, for airlines that could be quite difficult. You know, they're huge organizations, and you might have the funky developers on the one end of things who want to do all this kind of stuff, and you might have the people on the other side, the revenue people, that are saying, well, this isn't going to make us any money, what's the point? So that's where you get on the one hand some kind of conflict, but then hopefully the more progressive airlines are saying, well, let's just try things because they can be relatively inexpensive to introduce, and ultimately we will learn something about the way our passengers behave and what they want from us. So no, they're not getting too involved with stuff like this.
I do agree with you. Because I think it's changed. I think there is a mindset in the industry where everyone's thinking of the PSS contracts, which are 10, 15 years, and career-defining moves. But actually, you can pick up and drop a technology relatively easy these days. You can try it, and if you don't like it, you can scrap it. I do think with things like messaging platforms, I think that's a no-brainer for airlines, because Facebook's spending gazillions on their app. Use that instead. Why make your own app? It's great with them. Do you know what I mean? Like, your passengers are probably sat there whiling away their hours on Facebook and WhatsApp anyway while they're stuck at the airport. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, people are more familiar with messaging both in the workplace and in the personal space. So it's a technology that you can try out.
Yeah. And it's pretty straightforward, Facebook messaging and stuff. It's just getting the passengers into a mindset that you might talk to them on that channel, and getting that sort of sign up and all that kind of thing in the process. But it also, there's a lot of opportunities in there. And like I said, we're not talking about contact details and agency bookings because we always talk about that. But there are a lot of opportunities to get around those contact detail issues if you use social media messaging instead, because you don't necessarily need contact details.
Just on that point, Al, I mean, I've just noticed a couple of words that you said. You said getting the passengers into that mindset, and I do think sometimes it's actually getting the airlines into the mindset, because it's consumers and passengers that are potentially driving all this rather than the carriers themselves. Frankly, not many of them are that advanced to keep up with trends in consumers. They react rather than be proactive, arguably.
And I think it goes back to what you said earlier, Kevin, that the thinking should not be, we need to test that technology. The thinking should be, what are actually our customers and our staff working with every day, and how do we reach maybe more customers, different customer groups we haven't reached yet, or how can we communicate with our customers better, and therefore use the technology, and then just be clear what you want to use it for. Because I've seen many airlines who have had then the courage to introduce something, but because they didn't really think about, they wanted to do messaging instead of thinking, because everyone was doing it now, and someone in the board said, oh, but why are we not yet doing this, and why don't we have a chatbot? Instead of thinking about what to use it for and then start with this and do that well, they just introduced it, didn't have a clear strategy, and then it failed. And they said it failed, but it could have become a big success.
Yeah, and I suppose another thing on that is that if you think of it from a generation perspective, those that might be using these slightly less conventional channels to communicate with a brand, if we are to make the wild assumption that most of the people that use those are of a younger generation and potentially just leisure travelers, at some point many of those will become high spending regular passengers, corporate passengers, who are really the ones that you want to make money from because they spend more money. So that kind of shift between it being just a funky service that young people use to something that becomes a little bit more widespread across the passenger base, I think is really important.
We always think it's, these things are great, but they're all just channels ultimately, and you've got to work out.
Exactly.
You've got to be agnostic. Like, chatbot's grand, Facebook message is great, WeChat's great, email's good. You've got to look at these, because if everyone wants you to use that channel, that's the channel you have to use, as well as everything else. You wouldn't have ignored sending text messages or emails when those, like people probably did to begin with, ignore them as channels, but you've got to do them. You've got to do both. You've got to do all of it. Like, so you can, Nick, you can talk with a lot of people on how to pick, like, what do you do?
I think channels are interesting in that you can't just throw a technology at people and expect it to people to fire up. So what's the big attractor to people to go onto that channel? So you talk about Facebook, for example, and the travel industry, it strikes me that Instagram is all about people traveling, their travel experiences. So that might not seem like something you can directly apply to the airline industry, and yet it's already got a great attraction for travellers who already use it. So how can that medium be expanded? Because you've got the compelling draw towards it.
I think Instagram, if you wanted to pick a messaging channel that's like as far away from the experience of your average IT partner, like that's probably right up there. Like,
It's an interesting challenge. It's a provocation, you know. You just don't go.
And that's what people use when they travel. So why not use it?
Yeah. How can you turn that into a new proposition? Just the way that Facebook groups have emerged for business usage. How could the same thing be? How could Instagram be used in an interesting way, particularly as a visual medium? And that's it's a cross-language medium, and I think that's an interesting thing about mechanisation and AI and chatbots. You start to break over those language and cultural barriers.
These visual mediums.